How can a sick church save a dying world? I'm sick. Can you help save me? I'm sick. I need a friend. I'm sick and I don't know where to turn. I'm turning to the church who keeps telling me I'll burn. I'm sick. Will you reach for me? I'm sick. Will you humble yourself to teach me? I'm sick. Is this the place where I can find some peace? Or will you ignore me until my family is screaming, rest in peace? Yes, I'm sick, but I found that you're sick too. That's why when we enter your buildings, you don't know what to do. You don't understand how to triage. You don't understand how to properly diagnose. You don't understand the heart of a man. And we don't understand your approach. The love of God is real. And that is what you should share. With a sick world all around you, the church needs to show up and be there. Be present for the world, serving as God designed it to be. Designed to be the very hands and feet in the earth. Sharing the purest love, the love you learned from birth. It's unconditional. It's strong. It covers a multitude. It's patient. It's long-suffering. And it's definitely not rude. How can a sick church save a dying world? They can't.
In working with individuals that have been diagnosed with HIV/AIDS, it has been a rewarding experience. I worked with a group of women, and these individuals again had incurred this particular diagnosis. The experience was enlightening for myself as well as for them because it allowed for them to finally be able to speak their truth. Most times individuals with HIV or AIDS, they're living a life of shame or guilt. That would be pretty much at the crux of the matter. They're living this out. But amidst working with this particular population, I identified that trauma was at the real foundation. Unaddressed, undiagnosed trauma or PTSD. And so going about the treatment process with them, allowing for them to be able to give voice to the past traumatic situations in which they've experienced, they began to find a connection with others that had the same sorts of experiences or at least similar ones. And they found that they could rest in knowing that although this was their current situation, that hope was still able for them to achieve. Some of the triggers that I noticed that this group of individuals in which I worked with faced was judgment. It was how people perceived them. It was the lack of knowledge and insight on the subject matter of HIV and AIDS. And so individuals would shun them if they had a level of awareness that this particular diagnosis had been rendered to them.
Well, today's the day that I'm going to meet many members of the Jones family for the first time. It's also the day that I'll meet my brother for the first time. I really don't feel like facing the stigma and judgment of being a product of a teenage pregnancy. However, I know I can endure it because my brother endured so much more after he received his HIV diagnoses from these same people. Well, it's time to go. Say hello and goodbye.
Dad, how did it feel when you first learned that Kenny was diagnosed with HIV?
Honestly, it was like a death sentence. It was like I'm losing my son, I'm losing my child. And it was just like totally death sentence. What am I going to do now? How am I going to handle it? Planning funerals and everything. It was just like a death sentence.
And if I'm not mistaken, Kenny he had HIV and Hep C. And I recall speaking with you, and you were going to the hospital and you were visiting Kenny. And he decided one day he had enough of that place. Tell me about that day.
That's a funny day. It was kind of funny. The doctors came in with masks on and with the gowns and coats and things. And Kenny looking at them saying, I don't want to say what he said, but
Yes, you can.
what the hell are they doing with the gowns and coats on? Ain't nothing wrong with me. He said, I'm ready to get out of here. So actually, Kenny left. He walked out. He walked out the hospital that same day, I think. He said he was tired of feeling like a zombie and taking medication, and every morning they tell me this, and I don't have all the symptoms. But what he was experiencing, what they was telling him was the, I guess it was more so what they call it, when you take something in reaction to it.
Oh, adverse side effects.
Right. And I think he was looking at that rather than the symptom that he really had. So he said he didn't have what they were saying he had. So he decided that, hey, why am I still here? They got on masks. Nothing wrong with me. So he left.
Well, we're speaking of a time that was 30 years ago. And at that time, there was no awareness really of HIV, the effects, how you can catch it and stuff. And as you alluded to earlier, similar to COVID, like we didn't know a lot about it, just like we don't know a lot about COVID and how to treat it and things of that nature. Tell me about the instance where you admitted that you were afraid of your own son.
Now that's a tearjerker. Kenny was very, very sensitive. He was a sensitive person. And if he felt any way uncomfortable with you feeling uncomfortable, it really hurt. Yeah. He hurt from behind, all of that stuff. And so I was just really afraid of my son. And I wouldn't get close to him. He'd come to hug me, and it was just like, okay, he hugged me, but I really didn't hug him back. And he'd shake my hand. I really didn't shake his hand. I just held on to it. And so during this time, he probably felt that I need to address this thing, but he didn't do it with me. He called his mom, and he told his mother. His mother was in Alabama. And he told his mother that Dad is afraid of me. And she called me to verify what he was saying. And she asked me, are you really afraid of Kenny? Kenny said, you afraid of him? I said, yes, I am. Well, why are you afraid of him? I said, because he always talks about killing his daddy. And I said, but it's one thing strange about it. He always talks about killing me. And I'm saying to myself, if he wanted to kill me, why would he protect me at the same time? Because he would protect me. I don't care what you would say or do. If I go visit him someplace or we go someplace, he protects his daddy, but he's still saying out of his mouth he would kill me. So I said, well, if he's going to kill me, all he has to do is bite me. That's what I thought. And she and I had a long conversation, not able to recall the whole conversation. But then I said to myself, you know, if he's that sensitive about it, then I need to do some education. I need to educate myself. So I started looking up online and started reading a lot about it and asking the doctor's question, and come to find out I was totally wrong about it. I was all wrong. You just can't catch it like I thought you could. And so I educated myself. But before I educated myself, I have to say this. People made him feel uncomfortable also, and especially at the church. And he decided one day he's going to give someone a hug. And this person acted as if he was going to stab him with a knife. I mean, don't you hug me, get back. You know, I was standing there, I heard it. And don't you hug me, don't you hug me. Poor little fella, tears in his eyes, and he walked away. But before I educated myself, I couldn't say anything to them because I felt the same way they was feeling. I probably wouldn't have told him straight up in his face to get out of my face, don't hug me. But I'm thinking, wow, why am I sitting here looking down my nose at someone else, and I got the same feeling? So I did educate myself.
I had never been to Rockford, Illinois in my life. I heard of it, but never traveled to it and never thought I would travel to it. But at the age of 30 years old, I met my biological father for the first time. And right after that, tragedy struck our family. My brother Kenny, he was incarcerated on my first visit to Rockford, so I didn't get a chance to see him. My first time seeing him was when he laid in state. He was dead. He died from complications with HIV and hepatitis C. I decided that I would go to the funeral so I could meet other members of my family and at least say goodbye to my brother. It was interesting to say hello and goodbye in the same moment. When we arrived to the church, I was wondering why it was taking so long for us to enter into the sanctuary. I strategically wanted to be at the back of the line because some people are really ignorant, and I didn't want people to say, oh, well, she does have eyes like him, or who is this person? And I didn't even want my name to be on the obituary because of the ignorance of some people trying to figure out who I am and where I fit in. But as I was standing there and the line was not moving, I couldn't understand that. And finally, when I made it into the vestibule, the casket was outside of the door. And I'm like, wow, this is really odd. Am I part of an odd family? Like, why are we doing things this way? Many things went through my mind. But I continued to proceed forward, take a seat with the rest of my family. But when my father started to eulogize my brother, I found out why the casket was in the back.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to celebrate the homegoing celebration of my son, Kenneth Ronnie Jones. And first of all, you probably wondering why this casket is at the back of the church and place it at the front. And we'll straighten that out before I go any further. Number one, Kenneth was very sensitive. He was very, very sensitive about his illness. He really didn't want anyone else to catch what he had. He didn't want anyone else to go through what he was going through. So one day he was at church, and this lady came up to him and he went to give her a hug. And when he started to give her that hug, she bagged off like he had a gun trying to rob her or something. What are you doing? What are you doing? I'm not going to hug you. And it hurt his feelings so bad, he left the church that day with tears in his eyes and crying. And he came, I was there listening, and so he came to me after we got home, and he said, I'm not going to let that dampen my spirit. I'm still coming to church. I just have to find another way to approach it. And what he would do, he would come to church after church started, and then he would leave as soon as the pastor finished preaching, or as soon as the door of the church is over. He did that to avoid the people so they wouldn't have to come in contact with him. But he never let that dampen his spirit. So what I'm saying to you today is that Kenny didn't stop coming to church. He came and sat in the back. So I wouldn't think that it would be properly right to force him to come into church when he didn't feel comfortable coming to church because of the way people treated him. So we came and sit in the vestibule. So we're going to have his body to lie and stay in the vestibule rather than to bring it up front. Now, if anyone have a problem with that, then talk to me.
I know it was very difficult for you to see and witness those experiences that Kenny had while coming to church. How did that affect his spirit?
It didn't affect his spirit as far as by his faith, because he made some arrangements to where he could still come to church. His schedule to come to church probably was after the service started and leave before it ends. So he would come to church and sit out in the vestibule, and he listened to the whole service after it starts. And then just before it ends, around the time to open the door to the church, after he finished with that, he usually would just get up and leave. And then he'd tell his daddy, he said, I was at church. Sometime I couldn't see him back there. And he let me know. I said, Kenny, did you come to church? He said, I'm not going to let anyone stop me from coming to church. That was his goal. No one's going to stop him from coming to church. I just can't understand it. The church, I thought, was supposed to be a diagnostic and therapeutic center. That's what I thought. But in this case, how can a sick church heal a dying world? Because he was terribly upset about how the church treated him. And the church treated him very poorly, if you would say, ministering to his spirit. But he didn't let that dampen his spirit.
What do you think the church should have done differently at this time?
Well, with what I know now and what I knew then, see, that's a world of difference. See, I was part of that cruel church. And that's what makes me feel uncomfortable. I was totally a part of that cruel church. I kind of like fed my son to the dogs because they probably could see me reacting to his illness. And I'm looking at a son that has HIV positive. He was a drug addict at one time and schizophrenic. All of these things in hepatitis or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. He had all of those things, and surely instead of me ministering to him, I actually was afraid of him. And I think the church should learn how to treat mental illness. They should learn how to treat HIV/AIDS. Kenny was a sweetheart of a person. Now, he would give you the shirt off his back. Alan, same way. It was just alike. Quiet and mild-mannered. Kenny was until he get to drinking into the drugs. And he had quit that. So, my son, I say to you today, still as I would years, rest in peace. Thank you for your legacy and your faith.
This is the Real Black Coffee, no sugar, no cream, on location at SOAR to talk about a sick church can't save a dying world. And today I have with me Miss Leah Mills Chapman. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Val. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. We know that the church has evolved from what it used to be. Because it used to be a pillar in the community, a place where all crises in the Black community was handled. A lot of our power groups and our groups for Black liberation were birthed in the church. We have moved so far away from handling crises to exacerbating crisis-type situations that our members are going through. We have seen many instances of what the crisis looks like. Disrespect, being ostracized, being judged. So let's move to the autopsy. What is the cause of the death of the church?
Wow, that's very profound. The death of the church. I would say that the death of the church has come from the void of truth and honesty. It is the acceptance of whatever is presented, yet ignored. And so when I say that, the church is supposed to be the hospital for the sick. And when we think about hospital, a hospital diagnosis, right? A hospital treats. A hospital then releases back out into the community for the healing to occur. And so the church, being the hospital, has a role with looking introspectively from an honest lens of what is actually going on. That starts from individuals, that goes into processes of how to engage one to another relationally, and then it is to be released out into the community to be able to heal the dying world. But instead, the hospital is not adequately diagnosing what is going on within its body, right? The church is the body of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so it's not diagnosing adequately because the body, the individual, isn't being honest about their truth. And when you're dishonest, the congregation picks up culturally and socially this means of dishonesty, and dishonesty never turns out well. So that's what I would say is the rationale behind the dying church.
I agree, because the day that you get baptized, you go down a dry center, you come out a wet one. And then the day that you consider yourself saved, whatever that means, I would think that if I had to apply my own definition, you should be looking at insight and not outsight. We say, come as you are to the church, but that's not really true, because when people come as they are, they're not always accepted. So we have to change a lot of things that we're doing within the church, or it's going to be non-existent real soon.
Oh, yeah.
The older generation that believes in everything and buys into everything that's going on right now, once they die off, to get a new breed or get new people to come into the church, you're going to have to change the way that you're operating. You're going to have to be truthful, transparent, and honest, and hold yourself and other people accountable.
And I would add, Val, you have to be open to receive the truth of others. And so individuals are either wearing a mask within the church because they don't feel safe to share their truth because of judgment, right? And then you have others that are completely shying away, who may have tried to share their truth and it was not received. And then you have others that just says, from the outside looking in, I want no parts, because I'm looking for something that is going to give me some hope to continue to lead life, right, as I continue to move forward, right, from day to day. And so the church has to, again, begin to look structurally at what does it mean to be the body of Christ? What does it mean to be a follower of Christ? And I think that when we begin to define how Christ walked this earth, what he did, who he hung around, what sorts of things he sat in space with, then we can give others an opportunity for healing in this hospital space.
Absolutely. You have just tuned into another episode of The Real Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream, where I don't try to spill the tea or make you feel dazed like you drank a shot of cheap liquor. I just want you to see things from another perspective. And tonight, it was this perspective of Leah Mills Chapman. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Pastor Duckworth, can you tell us your experience as a pastor being more inclusive to individuals within the community?
First of all, I I honestly feel that it is an indictment on any congregation, any church that can be in a community but have no desire to impact the community, have no desire to reach the community, and to be a part of the community in which the church would be housed. I think it is upon us as the church to make an impact in the community, and particularly the community that's close to where we worship, close to where we serve. They should feel the impact of our presence, to the point that if the church decided to leave, there would be people in the community crying for the church to stay.
All right, Pastor, tell us your take on individuals that have AIDS and HIV and the role of the church and even being able to assist or help those individuals.
This was something that hit home to me as I was grappling and trying to develop and trying to mature in my faith. When the issue of AIDS, when it first hit, of course, there was a stigma that was based upon the individuals who had AIDS. And it was a point where people outside of the church didn't want to touch, didn't want to hug. And unfortunately, people inside the church didn't want to touch, didn't want to hug. And I remember some years ago, there was a young man who had contracted HIV, AIDS, which later turned into full-blown AIDS. And I was reluctant at first to go visit, to touch, and to share the space. And I was challenged by my late aunt, who challenged me to be love and to be like Christ and not to be like everyone else. And it just so happened that the first eulogy that I did was of this young brother whose life was cut short due to AIDS. And from that, I had an eye-opening experience and understood a whole lot better and matured in my faith to understand that anyone in need, the church should put their arms around and should embrace. And it is not our concern, it's not our business as to how individuals get whatever they have. Our job is to love individuals. And I was involved in some projects with the Gospel Against AIDS, and just going to some various experiences, workshops. And I remember one story that still sticks in my heart of a young lady who had contracted the virus because she had a husband that was unfaithful, and he didn't share anything with her. She just began to get sick, went to the doctor, and the doctor disclosed to her her status, and she went to her pastor for prayer and to share with him this life-breaking news and life-shattering news. And he changed the sermon that he was going to preach and preached about people with AIDS. And then at the end of the service, end of the sermon, he called her out by her name for prayer. And the horrified look that was on her children's face who did not know. And it made them never want to set foot in another church, whatever. And when she told that story, it broke my heart. And I literally cried as the sister shared, God rest her soul now. And that let me know that I'm either going to be a part of a church that embraces individuals, or I'm going to be that pastor. And it was never my desire to be that pastor that would make a person feel ostracized because they were sick. Our job is to love. So that has really inspired me on the way that I view individuals who suffer from AIDS, HIV, and being positive, and how I've tried to be embracing and preach about sermons that would include them and to let those individuals know that they are loved. And because AIDS was not listed in the Bible, the closest I could get to that experience would be lepers And so there's often times where individuals have leprosy or a life-threatening disease. I would always try to compare that and contextualize it in the light of current modern aids to help people get a better understanding that we need to be loving beyond boundaries.
If you could create the ideal situation for outreach, if you could create the ideal church and your congregation was full of people who had HIV, Hep C, schizophrenia, and on drugs, what would be your message to those individuals?
My first message, I believe, would be to get to know the individual. Get to know that individual to where you'll know him or her well enough to know their feelings. See, can you imagine yourself being in the position they are? See, put yourself in it. It's kind of like the Word of God. See, if we implant the Word in our hearts and mind, he said, let the Word of Christ dwell in you richly. If we let the Word dwell in us richly, it's kind of like walking in those people's shoes. If we walk in there, they said, walk a mile in my shoes. I wouldn't want to walk a mile in Kenny's shoes. I don't know if anyone would want to walk a mile in Kenneth's shoes. Kenneth had all of those issues that I had to learn how to deal with him. And when I learned how to deal with those issues and I learned the individual, then we got along just fine. He'd ride with me over there just to sit for a few minutes at Burger King, an hour or so. We didn't make it a few minutes, but sit there and eat chili together. They had all you can eat chili on a Wednesday. And he would go with me to school. After school, we go to Burger King and eat chili. He looked forward to that like he looked forward for church. That was his pride and joy to be with his dad after he found out that I wasn't afraid of him anymore. And that hurts for someone to have to deal with that type of feeling, knowing that he loved his daddy. He might say in those tragic times when he feeling bad, when he haven't had his medication properly or whatever there is, and he said, I will kill you. He didn't mean he would kill me. He meant, I want some attention from you. And I think the church need to learn how to give that attention to the mentally ill and to people that is suffering from different various types of illnesses.
So I want to give some encouragement to those that are working in the field, as well as those that may be elders or pastors of church spaces. There is a need to engage the suffering with empathy. You may not have had to experience it in your own body. You may not have someone that is within your family that have experienced it. But there is a need to engage individuals that are hurting at any level from this particular diagnosis with love, empathy, and compassion. And so watching what you say, watching your facial expressions and your affect. When an individual has encountered a traumatic experience, they're very attuned to your facial expressions and your affect. Be very mindful of how you approach them and how you speak with them. Keep love, compassion, and empathy at the height of your list.
What I would like to challenge our churches is to really be about what we talk about. If there's one thing we've learned from this pandemic, for so long, people would always throw the cliche out there, the church is not the building, it's the people. But I was challenged because many churches would not take the wise approach to shutting down for any length of time because they were afraid and they worshiped the building more than the people. And so I'm putting this challenge out as a church who personify and who do our job to emulate and copycat Christ and the love of Christ It is time that we begin to reach out to those brothers and sisters who suffer from HIV/AIDS. And it is time that we embrace them with love as Christ would. It is time that we make them feel as though they belong. That is someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's mother, someone's niece, someone's nephew, someone's aunt, someone's uncle, someone's grandfather, someone's grandson, someone's grandmother, someone's granddaughter. We cannot afford to discriminate against anyone, particularly as it relates to the love of Christ. God's love reaches everyone. And so I want to challenge our churches to put down our personas and to pick up what it means to really love individuals and to be sympathetic, but also loving towards those who suffer from HIV/AIDS. Let's not shut them out. Let's not close the door in their faces. Let's not act as though we concerned about them, as though we love them, but then don't want to do anything for them. There is something that we can do, be it an encouraging word, be it a visit, being in a phone call. There are so many ways that we can help our brothers and sisters who often suffer in silence, and no one in God's church, around God's church, who come in contact with God's church should ever suffer in silence unless they choose to. It should not be they suffer in silence because there's no one on the other end that is willing to open up, to listen, to pray for, to love on. That's what we're called to do. Not the easy cases, but the tough cases. Because that's when you really understand how much God you got in you. It's easy to love someone that's close. It's easy to love someone who we feel is perfect. But the challenge is, can we love someone whose life is in shambles? Can we love someone whose health is failing them? Can we love someone who has been stigmatized by society? And oftentimes even by the church. Because the first thing we want to try to figure out is, how did they get it? And that's what they deserve. No, that's not. That's not how faith works. That's not how grace works. That's not how love works. Love doesn't care how they got it. Love wants to make certain that they know the love is with them for as long as they have it.
Should I Stay or Should I Go isn't just a song popularized by The Clash. It's also a question many people ask themselves when they're in limbo at a sick church. If Kenny was your son, would you be okay with what happened to him? This film isn't a diss track. It's not about who does church better. Depending on your perspective, this is either an assessment or an autopsy. An exploration into why a lot of churches mean well but fail at ministering to those that suffer from mental illness, substance use, and HIV/AIDS. But if you're willing to keep it real with yourself about the unhealthy state of your sick, reckless, and toxic behavior at church, you're already in a better place. After all, a sick church can't save a dying world. I challenge you to see the entire scope of the issue so you can find a solution.